I want you to say that again. I think a lot of people out there don't understand how powerful Detroit is,
Good afternoon.
continues to be,
This
but
is
how
Heather
powerful
Dahlia, listening
Detroit
to
was,
Motown
how
Realty
much
on
wealth was
WJZZ
amassed
Cool
here.
TV podcast.
Well, it's still that way.
I am pleased to have you
The
back
Economic
for
Club of
the
Detroit is still the most
real
powerful
information
economic
about
club
real
in
estate
America.
for
Ooh, I
real
sit
people
corrected.
show. I
And
actually
if
have a
anybody
very
wants
special
to be
guest today.
president, if anybody
I
wants
just
to
want
be
to
mayor,
give
if
you
anybody
the
wants
tip
to
of the
be
day. We
governor,
talk about the
they
neighborhoods
got to
of
come
the
talk
day,
to Detroit
and I give you your
and
homework
our
for next
economic
week.
club and say
So
what
I
they're
want you
gonna
to
do
take a look at
with
Highland
business
Park.
and industry of
Highland Park
Detroit.
is part of Wayne County.
Now, that
Sandwiched,
industry
it's often
has been
confused with
both
Detroit,
a
and it's
blessing and
sandwiched
a curse.
between basically the northern
But
suburbs
there was a
and
little
Detroit
fellow
itself.
by the name of Henry
so it's a
Ford.
corridor that everyone that wants to come
And,
into the city
you know,
drives
Henry's
through,
dad
and it's
made
a
a big
corridor that
mistake
everybody
with him.
that's leaving the city
Oh,
has
yeah,
to
what
drive
was that?
through. And it
He was
is
supposed to take over the
an
family
area
farm
of
in Springwell,
fantastic
just 6
history,
miles west of
beautiful
Detroit.
architecture.
Oh.
And
But
if
one
you're
day, Dad
looking to
and
get into
His son are
multifamily
out for a
or
ride in a carriage, and they
we've
pass a
got a
neighboring
lot of
farm
buildings here that could really use
where there's a
rehabbing
steam
for
engine
some
at work.
stable rentals or
And
maybe even
Dad
condos.
stops the
It's something to
carriage,
think
they get
about.
out,
So that's for
little
next
Henry
week. If
walks
you want
around this
to
giant machine,
take a
great
look at
clouds
Highland
of
Park
black
and give me a
smoke
call
puffing,
at
steam hissing, gears
248-464-1116.
whirring. And little Henry looks
and
at
we
that
can
and
talk a little bit
says,
about
"No
it."
farming for
So
me,
today
Dad."
I am
Future
very
farmer of
tickled to
America
have
here.
Dick
That's the
Rubens,
future.
Mr. Dick
Well,
Rubens, Renaissance
Through a long
man.
series of events.
You
In
know,
1914,
anybody
he's
that's
got
been
his mass
listening
production
or
building running
knows
in
me
Highland
personally,
Park.
you know
the first
that
fully synchronized,
history.
integrated automation center
I have this
in the
firm
world.
belief that when we're all gone,
And
what's left standing is our
In
architecture
1914, he looks
and
at
our
his
art, but definitely our
workers,
architecture. So
and he
it's
says,
kind
"I'm
of
paying you
hard,
guys
I
scale
feel,
wage.
to embrace the
$2.50
forward motion of a
for
city
a
without
10-hour day.
understanding its past.
Now, keep in mind,
And Mr. Rubens
just
is
from
here
the
today to talk to us a
nerdy
little bit
Heather
about
social
Highland
justice
Park,
standpoint,
his
this is
experience in the police
1914,
department,
Yes, ma'am.
his experience through Detroit,
and
both
the
good and bad,
federal
and give us
minimum
a better
wage
understanding as
today
to how we're
is
going to
still
move
under
forward and what we
$9.
can learn from the past
So anyway,
to prevent those things from happening.
sidebar.
Because I know a
So
lot of
Mr.
you want
Ford
to
looks
move.
at No, that doesn't help. I was trying to move back, but that didn't help. He says,
Good afternoon. This is Heather Dahlia listening to Motown.
I want you to
Realty
say
on
that again.
WJZZ
I think a
Cool
lot of
TV
people out there don't
podcast.
understand
I am pleased to have
how
you back for the
powerful
real
Detroit
information about
is,
real estate for real
continues to
people
be,
show.
but how
I
powerful
actually
Detroit
have
was,
a very
how
special
much
guest
wealth
today.
was amassed here.
I just want to give
Well,
you the
it's still
tip of the
that
day.
way.
We talk about the neighborhoods
the Economic
of the day.
Club of Detroit is
and I
still
give you your
the most
homework for
powerful
next week.
economic club
So
in
I
America.
want
Ooh,
you
I
to
sit
take a look
corrected.
at Highland
if
Park.
Anybody wants to be
Highland Park
president,
is
if
part of Wayne
anybody wants
County,
to be
sandwiched.
mayor, if
It's often
anybody wants
confused
to
with
be
Detroit,
governor,
and it's
they
sandwiched
got to come
between
talk to Detroit.
basically the northern
and our
suburbs
economic
and
club
Detroit
say
itself.
what they're going to do.
So it's a corridor that everyone that wants
business
to come into
and
the city
industry
drives
of
through,
Detroit.
and it's a corridor that everybody that's
Now
leaving
that
the city has
industry
to
has
drive
been
through.
both
And
a
it
blessing
is
and a curse.
An area of
but
fantastic history.
There was a little fellow by
beautiful
the name of Henry
architecture.
Ford.
And if you're looking to get into
And,
multifamily,
Henry's
or,
dad made a big
like,
mistake with him.
We've got a lot of
Oh, yeah,
buildings
what
here
was
that
that?
could really use rehabbing.
He
for
was supposed
some
to take over the
stable
family farm in
rentals or maybe
Springwell,
even
just
condos.
6
It's
miles
something to
west
think
of
about.
Detroit.
So that's
Oh.
for next week. If
But
you
one
want
day, Dad
to
and his
take a
son
look at
are
Highland
out
Park,
for a
you
ride
give
in
me
a
a call
carriage, and they
at
pass a neighboring farm
248-464-1116.
where there's a steam engine at
and we
work.
can talk a little bit about
Uh-oh.
it.
And
So today
Dad
I am
stops the
very
carriage, they
tickled
get
to
out,
have Dick
little
Rubens,
Henry walks around this
Mr.
giant
Dick
machine,
Rubens,
great clouds of
Renaissance
black smoke
man.
puffing, steam hissing, gears whirring.
You know, anybody
little
that's
Henry
been
looks at that and
listening
says,
or
"No
knows me
farming for me,
personally,
Dad.
you
That's-
know
that,
future farmer of America here.
That's
history,
the future.
Uh,
Well,
that I have this firm belief
Through a
that
long
when we're all
series of
gone,
events,
what's left standing
in
is our
1914,
architecture
he's got his
and
mass
our art,
production
but
building
definitely
running in
our
Highland
architecture.
Park. The first
So
fully
it's kind of
synchronized,
hard, I feel,
integrated
to
automation
embrace
center
the
in
forward
the world.
motion of a city without understanding its
And
past.
In
And Mr.
1914,
Rubens
he
is
looks
here
at
today
his
to talk to us a little bit about Highland
workers,
Park, his
and he
experience
says,
in the
"I'm paying
police
you guys
department,
scale
his
wage,
experience through Detroit, both good and bad,
$2.50
and give us a
for a
better
10-hour
understanding
day.
as to
Now, keep
how
in
we're going to
mind,
move forward and what we
just from
can
the
learn from the
nerdy
past
Heather
to prevent
social
those
justice
things from
standpoint.
happening again.
This is
Because I know a
1914,
lot of you
Yes,
want to
ma'am.
many
Okay.
to the city, and you
and
should.
the
There's
federal
so many
minimum
beautiful neighborhoods.
wage
There's so much
today today
architecture.
is still
but I
under
want you to
$9.
have a little listen.
So
as
anyway,
to how the city came
sidebar.
So Mr.
and
Ford
actually
looks at that
how
and
and
he
when
says,
it
"That's
unraveled
not
a little
my
bit, and
idea
how
of
we're
the
trying to
American
never
dream.
ever go back to that
You
place
guys
again.
can't
So,
buy the car
Mr.
you build.
Rubens,
You can't
welcome
buy a home.
to
You
Motown
can't
Realty.
send your kids
Thank
to
you, Heather.
college.
You are.
That's nice to be here. So tell you what.
I must also
Yesterday I
add
paid you
that if
$2.50
you are interested in
your
touring the
10-hour day.
phenomenal Piquet
Tomorrow you
Plant,
come in,
one
you're
of the
only going
most
to work 8
important
hours. I'm going to
landmarks
pay you $5
anywhere, in
a
my
day.
opinion, certainly here.
The largest
This is
wage
the
paid to a
gentleman for the job.
manufacturing
So
employee
why
in
don't you
the
go ahead and
world.
tell us a little
Wow.
bit about how you got started there and your experience in
Clara
the city.
Ford wakes up the next
You know the
morning
neighborhoods
to
better than
10,000
anybody
people in her
else.
front yard at
Well, it's
Edison
my
and 2nd
pleasure to be
Avenue, looking
one of the
for
board
a
members
job
for
for the
Ford.
Highland Park Chamber of Commerce. When he gets
We
down to
are
Highland
all in a good
Park,
family that
there's
way.
100,000 people in the street looking for a job.
Detroit,
at Highland
to
Park.
me, is a
100,000
fascinating city.
6
I've been
million
in Detroit
people
since
will get up and move
1950.
from all around the
We
world
came here
to
from
Detroit
Kansas City. My father's
because you
job
can
got
make
transferred
$5
here.
a day in Detroit,
And
Detroit
it has
becomes
been
the
a
wealthiest
wonderful
community
experience.
Well, there you have it.
Now, fortunately,
his
I was never
reward for
smart enough
this
to know what
his
I couldn't
stockholders
do.
I love that.
And
They
love
said
that.
those
You
are
should
our
get that
dividends
shirt.
that
Yeah.
you're giving to the
You
workers.
make a million. Can you
I've been
imagine?
able, and Ford
in
said, well,
my
wait a minute.
lifetime
If we
to be
give
able
our
to do
workers
many,
a living
many
wage,
interesting things,
they'll be
in
able
and
to
around
afford
the
the
city
car
of
that we
Detroit.
build.
You
If
mentioned
we
I
give
was
our
a
workers
police
a living
officer,
wage,
yes, and I was public
everybody
safety
else is going to
supervisor
have to
for
pay a
McClellan
living
College.
wage, and they'll be able to buy the
Chief of
car we build.
security
We're
for the
going to make a
Detroit
lot of money
Institute of
here.
Arts.
That's
The
fascinating to me.
stockholders
I ran
said,
a-
no,
What-
those
what
are our
year was that?
dividends.
Or
That was
years?
the lawsuit lasted until 1919 when Ford bought out
You know, it's-
all the
I'm
original
sorry to
stockholders
interrupt,
and
but
said,
my
get thee
dad-
gone, we'll do this my
My
way.
dad, the firefighter in
And
Detroit, he had such a
The
hard
auto
time relating
industry
to the
boomed
daughter.
in Detroit.
The son was easy.
By
The
1923,
Sicilian
Ford was
bloodline.
producing
The daughter was
2 million
difficult.
cars a year
And
at the
he, from the
Highland
time
Park
I can
plant.
ever remember, I mean,
A
as
number not reached
very,
again
very,
until the
very young. He
1950s.
knew
And
the
you know
visual
the
art and
letter of
performing arts
every
from
model.
what I
I
liked.
can't keep my
He was-
letters straight,
he was
but
not
you
necessarily
know
a Renaissance
every
man, but he
letter.
did
I'm the
appreciate
girl,
things.
the woman
And he
that
would always
doesn't know
take
about
me to
cars
the
that falls
DIA
back on
because
the
it was
T,
free,
but there was a
because he worked
lot
for the
more
city.
than the T.
There
And I
were a lot
remember
more
those
than the
days
T.
where there was one gallery
But anyway,
open, and the rest were boarded up.
by
And
1923,
so
you could buy a Model
you
T
remember
in any
that,
country
and it
in the
is an
world
impressive,
for
impressive art collection.
$260. The DIA is considered to be the fifth-ranked art museum in the country.
My favorite Van Gogh.
Magnificent
And
thing
the-
that happened.
well, actually,
50%
their
of all the
collection
cars
of,
in the world,
contemporary art is
1923,
It's
were
superb.
pretty
produced by the
fantastic.
Ford Motor Company. One of the reasons
Right here
that
at
our
Highland
museum
Park.
is so the first community college in America, the Highland Park Community College, was founded here in Highland Park. Education was a major component for Mr. Ford. One of the cool things that he did at his Highland Park plant, right next to it, he built a school, the Henry Ford Trade School. And this was a school for orphans and juvenile delinquents.
What a great idea. We could
And
sure use that
The
now.
idea was that you went to school from 9 a.m. or from 5 a.m. in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. You learned your trade, and then you got an apprenticeship in the auto works, and you made good money for the rest of your life.
And you stayed out of trouble.
And you stayed out of trouble. And that particular school led to the creation of Henry Ford Community College and Lawrence Technical University today. Unfortunately, we no longer have a trade school for orphans and juvenile delinquents, something that we really need to get back into doing.
And there's plenty of property and real estate here and people who are willing to be hands-on and help with city and getting things done and permits. And we are always looking for investors to come in and not only make money, but make some history, make some good changes. It's something I would love to see.
Oh yes, oh yes. So anyway, when you look at Detroit, Detroit has been the biggest boom and bust economy in America for 300 years, 300 plus years. We had the French and Indian War. We had the War of 1812. In 1805, the whole city burned down.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
And we came in with a very cool plan from Judge Woodward and Mr. L'Enfant, who was designing Washington, D.C., after it was burned in the War of 1812. And we had the Woodward plan called for these beautiful boulevards and parks and octagon-shaped centers for the city.
I want to ask you something. I'm sorry to interrupt you again. I just want to say you're listening to WJZZ Cool TV podcast. We're here with Dick Rubens on Motown Realty, real information about real estate for real people. Is it true that Outer Drive was fashioned after the Champs-Élysées?
So was Grand Boulevard.
So was West Grand Boulevard.
Now, Grand Boulevard was so far out in the sticks when we built it, and there was such ridicule for building that beautiful road,
So gorgeous.
that the farmers ran horse races on Grand Boulevard because there was no traffic.
Oh,
Uh,
not now.
not now.
Now it's all those
Well, see,
restored
Detroit
mansions.
city fathers have never had the vision, unfortunately. Detroit was never going to grow, and it always grew, and it kept growing, and it kept growing, and it kept growing, and now metropolitan Detroit has got about 5.25 million people in it.
Metropolitan Detroit.
You know, it grew way beyond the city boundaries.
But the
and
city itself.
It grew because of the things that we did here.
Mm-hmm.
We were big in transportation. We were big in the border to Canada. We're still the largest port to Canada.
Yeah.
The railroads gave birth to the auto industry because the railroad intersections here in Milwaukee Junction were such that you could go anywhere in the country from
I
here.
love that area, by the way.
It
That
is.
if you're out there, you're young, and you want to find a really cool place to live. I don't care if you're in Brooklyn or LA or I don't care where you are. You got to come here. Milwaukee Junction is a really fun. Come grab it while you can.
Come grab it while you can.
Yeah.
Now, the 1832, we had a cholera epidemic in Detroit, which is very relevant today.
Yeah.
10% of Detroit's population died in that cholera epidemic. 1865, we got the Civil War. Detroit does very well because we're manufacturing all kinds of goods that are used in the Civil War. In the 1880s, there's a 20-year recession. That 20-year world recession gives birth to the automobile. A fellow by the name of Gottlieb Daimler is over in Germany.
Daimler Chrysler.
And Daimler is sitting on his front porch lamenting the fact that he's about to lose his house, he's about to lose his factory. He looks at the gasoline engine that he makes for boats sitting on his lawn. He looks at his wife's carriage. He looks at his new safety bike with its chain and sprocket drive system.
Yeah.
He puts the three together and wow, there's an automobile. Now, in 1891, Henry Ford is tinking in the little shop on Bagley Avenue behind his house, and he's working on his quadricycle.
Yep.
In 1896, he has a chance meeting with Tom Edison in New York, his boss.
You
Does
guys hearing all this? This is some serious stuff. Thomas Edison, Henry Ford. I think people often Detroit has kind of fallen by the wayside, but it was such a city of innovation, technology. We're on our way there again. But so he runs into Tom Edison.
Accidentally in New York. Now Ford is working for the Edison Illuminating Company on Washington Boulevard. And he can't talk to Edison about the Edison Illuminating Company. He can't talk about Edison's inventions. All Ford can talk about is the universal car, the car that's going to put the world on wheels. Edison listens patiently for a few minutes and finally interrupts him and says, "Hey, son, you're obviously very passionate about this. The best advice I can give you, a whole lot of people are going to tell you you're wrong. A whole lot of people are going to tell you you don't know what you're doing. I, Tom Edison, know 9,000 ways not to make a light bulb. Son, you follow your dream, you're going to do just fine." June of 1896, Clara Ford is awakened at 1 o'clock in the morning by a terrible clatter in her backyard.
Oh my gosh.
She jumps out of bed, she throws open the sash, she looks out, and what to her wondering eyes should appear but her crazy husband bashing out the side wall of a rented shed that they had behind the house. Our great inventor had made his car too wide to go through the door.
Oh, okay.
But that June evening, he'll take a ride around the streets of Detroit that will literally change the way everyone in the world will live and the way everything will be manufactured. And Detroit booms yet again. Now, you got to remember that Detroit's a manufacturing town.
Yeah.
We make railroad cars. We make stoves. We're the largest manufacturer of cast iron cook stoves anywhere in the world, and we export all over the world. An Art cook stove will cost you $2,000 in 1900.
Wow,
It
that's
was
hard to imagine.
It was a beautiful stove.
That is hard to
made
imagine.
right over here at Milwaukee and Russell.
I found one in a house that's been vacant for a long time. It was in the basement about 6 months ago, and I told the people who were selling it I wanted to buy it from them, but they said if you can get it out of the basement, if you can get out of here, it's yours. Well, suffice to say, but it was beautiful object.
There's always a way. There's always
Beautiful
a way.
object, yeah.
But anyway, so in 1901, Detroit is just coming out of this 20-year recession. And, well, I should go back. I should go back to 1891. A fellow by the name of Hazen Pingree. And a few people remember Hazen Pingree, but Pingree was a businessman here in Detroit. He made shoes. Second largest shoe manufacturer in the country. City fathers came to him and said, the town's a mess. We got vacant stores, vacant factories, vacant houses. You got to fix it.
It's a tall order.
Hazen said, I'm in the shoe business. I don't want to be in politics. They said, no, you're in politics. You're going to fix it. So he ran for mayor, got elected. Now, wonderful Hazen is out for a ride with his wife in a carriage one night, and he is looking at the mess that Detroit's in. And his wife says to him, you know, these people aren't far from farming. If we took and created some vacant land for them, they could farm and get through this. And so we took parcels of land all over the city of Detroit and turned them into what they called Pingree's potato patches. And people farmed and they got through it. Now, isn't that an interesting correlation to...
Yeah, well, and just to remind anybody who's listening or watching, too, one of my favorite things in Detroit is Pingree Farms today.
Absolutely.
Jim Green, Milton Manufacturing, and when I last checked, it's been a couple weeks, but it was still the largest urban farm in America, and one of the only ones with livestock. So, to honor...
Exactly.
Mr. Pingree, we still have Pingree Farms, and there's goat yoga. So if you're out there and you're young and you're hip and you're cool, you want to do goat yoga, that's another reason to move here. And the goats are not harmed, the goats love it. They have a blast. So farming saved the city once before.
Once before. Now in 1901, we're looking at this and we're saying, okay, if we're ever going to get out of this recession, we got to find some new kids with great ideas. We got to feed them venture capital and let them do what they know how to do. So, the Detroit Driving Club, they got a mile circuit over at Jefferson and Chalmers racetrack that they had. And this is 1901, they had a racetrack.
Boys will be boys.
Yes.
Forever and ever. The combustion engine probably ruined a lot of relationships, but boys will be boys.
So they're given the job of promoting a great race, inviting all of the 190 automakers in America come to Detroit and race. Henry Ford is in his second business. His first business, the Detroit Automobile Company, went bust in a year because Henry didn't really know about how to run a business.
Excuse me 1 second. I just want to remind you to listen to WJZZ Cool TV and podcast. Back to Henry Ford didn't really know how to run a business.
So he gets in his second business, and he's got a board of directors, his stockholders, who think he should build big, expensive luxury cars for wealthy people. He understands that's not where his market is going to be. He wants to build the car everybody gets.
I love that.
He decides he has to get out of the company. He's got to get out with his patents intact. But before he goes, he does something very important. He diverts company money to build his sweepstakes racer for this race.
Oh my gosh.
Now, the Detroit Driving Club attracts Alexander Winton of Cleveland, Ohio, the greatest race driver in America at the time. Winton runs an automobile factory in Cleveland, Ohio.
So he's like the McLaren,
Yeah,
Team
He's-
McLaren at
he's
the
a
time.
very wealthy guy building a cool car, and he's doing really well. So he comes to Detroit to race for prestige. The driving club understands he's going to win the race because he always wins the race. Well, what would you like to win for winning the race? Well, I got my eye on a beautiful Tiffany cut glass punch bowl. And there it is in the winner's circle waiting for him to come and pick it up. Now, Ford has diverted company cash to build his sweepstakes racer, much to their dismay, because they think he should be building cars that they can sell, not playthings to go out and race. But Ford understands if you're going to be in the automobile business, you got to race and you got to win. Now, Winton has a 40 horsepower race car. That's a monster machine in 1901.
At the time, yeah. Now it's a lawnmower or a leaf blower.
Henry Ford builds a little 26 horsepower two-cylinder speedster. It shouldn't be any competition for Mr. Winton's mighty 40. But Ford the engineer has reasoned that Winton's car is very fast in a short race.
Oh.
This is going to be a 10-mile endurance race. A whole 10 miles. Now, 10 miles is 1 day's journey by horse and cart to get your crop to market.
Yeah.
That's why the race was set at 10 miles. So, Ford shows up race day with his little 26 horsepower speedster. Flag drops. 12,000 people had bought tickets to watch this race because Winton was coming to town to race. Nobody knew who this guy Ford was.
Who's this kid?
The race goes on. Winton soars to the lead, stays there for 8 laps, unchallenged. Crowd cheering every time he passes. Well, in the 8th lap, his car begins to smoke.
Uh-oh.
In the 9th lap, it begins to sputter.
Uh-oh.
In the 10th lap, it's losing power. And the unknown Henry Ford in his little 26 horsepower speedster comes charging by for the win. He'd built his car for stamina, not for speed. At least he'd finish. To the victor go the spoils. He picks up the $1,000 purse, which he desperately needs because he's about to quit his job. He picks up Mr. Winton's beautiful Tiffany cut glass punch bowl. And best of all,
Touche.
he picks up 11 stockholders who will provide him with an unlimited source of venture capital upon which to build his third company, the Ford Motor Company.
And that third time is a charm.
The third time is the charm. He's learned what he doesn't know. He surrounds himself with people who do know what he doesn't know. And he puts out a recruiting sign, which I love. I'm looking for a lot of people with the infinite capacity to not know what can't be done.
I love that. I have to write that. That's brilliant.
Well, that was the statement of Detroit in its early days. In the early days of the 20th century, we could do anything.
Yeah,
And we did do anything.
we did.
Now, in 1904, Ford is building his Piquette plant. He and the Dodge brothers, who came to town in 1900 to get into the auto industry,
And where were the Dodge brothers from originally?
they were from Niles, Michigan.
Niles. Okay.
And they opened a little bike building operation and machine shop in Niles. They quickly determined that Niles was a very small town and they weren't going to sell many bikes.
Still a small town. Very
So
nice.
they moved to Windsor, where they became wealthy bike builders and machinists
In Canada.
in Canada. 1900, they look across the river and they say, that auto industry is going to be big. Excuse me. So they come across and they set up in the Boydell building where Nicky's Pizza is now,
Oh,
on
okay.
Beaubien,
Really good pizza, by the way.
just in time for Ransom Olds Auto Factory to burn down in 1901.
Man,
the
it's like
Oldsmobile
just
factory.
can't catch a break.
So Olds goes to the Dodge brothers and says, hey, would you guys build parts for me? And they said, sure, that's why we're here. Ford saw the parts that they were building. They were exquisitely machined, beautiful parts. Ford goes to them and said, would you make parts for me? And the Dodge brothers said, yeah, sure, that's why we're here. Well, I got one problem. I don't have any money. Would you guys take stock in exchange for parts? The Dodge brothers looked at Ford and understood that he'd won the great sweepstakes race, that he was a great engineer. Said, sure, we'll take 10% of your company, and John Dodge becomes vice president of Ford Motor Company. Now we're really in the auto industry.
Oh my gosh! Now this is the moment for Detroit, right?
This is the moment.
Yeah, yeah. And you're listening to WJZZ Cool TV and podcast. Thanks for joining us again. I'm here with Dick Rubens on Motown Realty. So we've got Ford, the Dodge brothers.
Now, 1904, they're building the Piquette plant, Mr. Ford's first factory, built for and owned by the Ford Motor Company.
I'm gonna, the realtor, right? Something that was unique to Detroit that was both a blessing and a curse, and stop me if I'm wrong, was the amount of land that we had.
Absolutely.
So we welcomed this opportunity, like New York City and Chicago and a lot of other places didn't have this, and easy international access and all that. And I think one of the downfalls of having all that space was building all the single family homes and spreading
that
out.
was also one of the blessings of 1914. Mr. Ford thought that you should be a home owner. And by 1953, 74% of the residents of the city of Detroit owned their own home.
And that's incredibly unique. And to this day, we have some of the lowest. We don't have rentals. And I'm always telling investors, people who want to get into development, we need rentals. You know, like we need.
Well, that
places,
was the fall down of Detroit.
Yeah. So that it was a blessing and the curse.
Unfortunately, the density of single-family homes doesn't pay the bills of a great city. And though it was wonderful for homeowners, as far as a city collective, it was a financial disaster.
And what year are we talking about here again?
Well, this was 1953, which was probably right in the premier time for Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
Post-World War II was a wonderful time for Detroit. The GIs were coming back. They were buying cars. They were buying refrigerators. They were buying houses.
Mm-hmm.
They were setting up their life. And the auto industry offered them very good pay, a very good job, and they came to Detroit by the droves. And it was just the boom time of Detroit. It was a time I grew up in Detroit. And it was a wonderful time to be in Detroit. The J.L. Hudson Company was the largest department store in the country.
My mom cried.
The
when
wealthy
they
people from
leveled
New
it.
York, the wealthy people from Los Angeles, the actresses and actresses from both cities, both came to Detroit by train to go to the J.L. Hudson Company and shop. Little story about J.L. Hudson that I'll share with you to tell you what a store it was. We came here in 1950 from Kansas City. Somehow my mother's cooking utensils didn't make the move.
Uh-oh.
We get set up and she's got nothing to cook with. She walks across the street to the new lady that she'd met across the street. Wonderful lady who was my mentor and my guide through my childhood. She says, I got this problem. Lorene says, no problem. We'll call J.L. Hudson. An hour and a half later, a green semi-truck shows up in front of our house. A guy gets out in a green uniform with a cap on, his name and Hudson on his shoulder, lapel there, and the guy comes to the door with a whole array of cooking utensils, lays them out on our dining room table. My mother selects what she wants. He sets up a charge account with her, and the deal is done. We've got the cooking utensils that we need.
I think Hudson's was the first card.
It was
I know my mom, my grandmother, my mom and my dad, I remember them both, well, my mom's still with us, but she talks about that. She said that was just unheard of. Nobody had that.
Only you didn't get a credit card.
It was just a charge card.
No, even before the charge card, what you got was a brass chip with your name and information on it that hung down in the accounting office in the basement of the Hudson department store.
Wow.
And when you would go to the counter, they'd write out a bill, put it in a vacuum tube that would be sucked down to the accounting office. That ledger would be taken out, and that amount would be put in your ledger. And when you got through shopping that day, you'd go back downstairs and turn in your brass chip,
That's cool.
which stayed in the department store.
That's
And that
really
was the
cool.
way we did it to begin with.
I miss Hudson's. I miss Hudson's so much. I got my prom dress at Hudson's. I think my first communion or my confirmation. I just remember going to Hudson's was such a big deal.
Christmas time at Hudson's was phenomenal.
When I was in New York and I was in Macy's, I remember going up to the top floor at Macy's to the Christmas land and thinking, well, this is nice, but
But not
it's not as nice as JL Hudson.
not near as
All
nice.
those pictures on Santa's lap, yeah.
All through the Christmas season, there used to be traffic jams downtown because all the windows all the way around J.L. Hudson Company were filled with Christmas displays.
Yeah.
And these were magnificent little vignettes of Christmas. And people would come from miles around to look at those Christmas displays that were put up in there. And of course, the Christmas parade
Yeah.
was a wonderful event that drew, well, probably close to 1 million people every year to see the Hudson's Christmas parade. Wonderful event. But back, if you look at Detroit's rise, one of the big things that happened in Detroit's rise was that we became the arsenal of democracy. By the Second World War, 50% of all the war production done in America was done in the 16 counties of southeastern Michigan.
I know Willow Run had some big plants. That's Rosie the Riveter.
1938, Mr. Ford was asked to go out to California to look at the Consolidated Motor Works, where they were going to build the B-24 Liberator bomber. He went out and looked at it. On the way back, he was in a club car and a train with the government officials, and they said, well, Mr. Ford, what do you think? And Ford said, well, fine fella, skilled staff, well equipped. See no reason why he can't build the 600 bombers a year he's talking about.
Wow.
But I'm figuring if we're really going to go to war, we're going to need about 600 a month. And if you need 600 a month, I'll build them in Detroit. He took out a napkin, put it up on the club table, and he sketched out the Willow Run bomber factory that he envisioned. On the strength of that napkin, he got $200 million to build the largest hangar in the world.
$200 million. That's still a lot of money.
Well, yeah, but it was the biggest hangar in the world. And by 1942, in full production, Mr. Ford was producing one B-24 Liberator bomber every 57 minutes.
That's incredible.
1,225,000 pieces in that bomber every 57 minutes. That's what we do in Detroit.
And we still have General Dynamics. We still have a
We're
huge...
still the largest producer of military equipment in the
We've
country.
got a big DOD outpost at the Detroit Arsenal in Warren.
It's always a mixed blessing for us. We created this wonderful enterprise with tool and die shops and engineering firms all over the place. In 1946, the hot war in Europe is over, but the Cold War is beginning.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the Soviet Union has a nuclear bomb. The Defense Department comes to Detroit and says, you know, you guys are all in one nuclear bomb. You got to sprawl.
Oh, one target.
You're one target, and
yeah.
your whole engineering complex goes up in smoke. So our magnificent airplane industry was moved to the West Coast because we feared that if the Russians attacked us, we'd be speaking Russian to the Mississippi because we had no strategic population west of the Mississippi to hold that land.
Wow.
So a plan was fomented that we were going to build 100 new cities over 1 million population west of the Mississippi by 1985. Where was the population and the industry to support those cities going to come from? We were going to rip it out of the 200 northeastern industrialized cities and move it west. And we did.
You're talking about Schenectady, Buffalo?
Albuquerque.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, we were taking Buffalo and
Yeah, where GE started and
all of those northeastern industrialized cities, pulling population and industry out of them to support the westward expansion.
mm-hmm.
And we did that very successfully. And then the plan was, well, we'll go back and fix the cities when we're done.
Famous last words, right?
Famous last words, yes. Well, we did that in Detroit. We picked up 150,000 military-oriented engineers, and we pulled them out of Detroit along with their families, and we sent them all over the country. We took the tool and die shops and the machine shops and the engineering centers, and we pulled them out and we moved them all over the country, leaving a 40 square mile vacant hole in the middle of Detroit. Now, one of the interesting things about that vacant hole was that back in 1923, we had figured out that we were dropping incendiary bombs on Tokyo and other cities, and that you could kill 10,000 people with a single 100-pound incendiary bomb in the firestorm that ensued. City fathers looked at Detroit and said, wow, we got the same frame house neighborhoods,
Yeah.
3 feet apart from each other. We got to do something about that. We got these wonderful, quickly built apartment buildings that were just fireboxes.
Yeah.
They were 4-minute burns. We got to get rid of those, get those out of the city. So that all became part of that 40 square miles. The asbestos, the small kitchens, the lousy bathrooms, things that nobody wanted
Yeah.
anyway, got cleaned out of the city. And of course, today our wonderful media runs into those 40 square miles every chance they get.
Yeah.
This is Detroit.
I know, and it's not.
And it's not.
It's not Detroit.
Detroit is 139 square miles, not 40 square miles. We've got 99 square miles of really cool, wonderful, beautiful neighborhoods. And one of the things I want to talk about is the fact that what makes those neighborhoods wonderful and beautiful is not only the unique architecture. Some of the finest architects in the world built these homes.
Also
The finest craftsmen, the finest materials built these homes. But the other thing that makes these neighborhoods really cool is their block clubs, their neighborhood associations.
Hold that thought for 1 second. You're listening to WJZZ Cool TV and podcast. I am so happy to hear about block clubs because this is something that I think younger people and Generation Z and Y, I don't know, I'm an X. I'm the tail end of the baby boomers and early X. I get them all mixed up. But this kind of familiarity, this kind of public life, this kind of stuff, this is one of the things. This is one of the things I want you to come here. I want you to move here. I want you to invest here. So tell us about these block clubs.
Well, I'll tell you about my famous block club. In 1973, I moved into the Boston Edison Historic District here in Detroit. Before it was an historic district.
You're dating yourself, but sure.
I've been around here a while.
Yeah, you gotta own it, right?
So I move into the neighborhood. The first night that I am in, 65 families throw me a welcome to the neighborhood party and said, glad you're part of us. Here's the committees. What would you like to join? And from then on, I was hooked in the block club.
And so it began.
Now, that is the oldest continuously operating neighborhood association in Michigan.
I did not know that.
It is, it is.
I have some friends that live over there that moved into Boston Edison, and a lot of clients, and they, many of them have gotten involved. But I had no idea that was the oldest
But if,
HOA.
but if you look at University City, at Indian Village, at 100 other substantial neighborhoods, the thing that is key to their success is their block club. The block club is responsible for the PTA at the school, the Parent Teachers Association. The block club is responsible for keeping the neighborhood cleaned up. The block club is responsible for the neighborhood patrol that keeps the dope houses out. And the activism that prevents negative influences from being in the neighborhood. In Boston Edison, at one time, we had a problem right after the riots where we had a lot of vacant houses. So the association put together a development corporation, started buying the vacant houses, fixing them up to a point where they could be sold to a wonderful buyer who would
Yeah.
continue the restoration. And that's how we kept the neighborhood solid.
And it's kind of what we're doing now.
We're still doing it.
Yeah.
We're still doing it there.
Yeah, more and more.
And it's the kind of thing that creates a solid neighborhood, creates a solid school. Kids in that neighborhood, I can read off the numbers of the kids that grew up there, and they grew up there in a culture where kids were welcome everywhere. The parties were always family parties with the kids there, meeting the people.
Well, the world's kind of like that now. There's
And-
no place you can go. Vegas, Atlantic, there's no place you can go now that isn't kid-friendly.
Well, but as a result of that, the doctors, the architects, the engineers, I have a wonderful young man who I used to babysit, who is working on the cholera
Oh.
vaccines and
Wow.
on
Science, medicine.
immunology for what have you. They were all overachievers, all wonderful achievers. Wonderful girl who got her medical degree by joining the Peace Corps. Came back and I asked her, what are you going to do? And she had the opportunity to go to any hospital or clinic or what have you and make buku bucks. She said, well, I'm going to be the doctor at the Detroit Youth Home.
Wow.
And I looked at her and I said, but why would you do that? And she looked at me and said, well, I think those children need me. And that was the kind of kids that we
That's
grew.
really special. That's
And-
really, really special.
It was special. Every one of those
Yeah.
kids, you look at them today and you say, wow, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
My favorite architect that I used to babysit for, her son played Carnegie Hall on the cello at 9 years of age.
Oh my gosh.
Talk about overachievers.
Wow. I love this. I just love this.
And that's the kind of neighborhoods that we have in Detroit that the news media can never find.
No, no.
They just can't seem to get to those 99 square miles of cool town.
Yeah. Yeah, and we are making great gains. We need, of course, we want people to come back here. The city has changed. It has become more diverse. It has become a very cosmopolitan city. We have people moving here from all over the country and all over the world. I mean, Ford has just purchased the train station. They're turning it into a technology. Waymo is working on the autonomous vehicle. We have a whole new surge of technology, and may not be manufacturing per se, but it is talent, and it's young engineers and innovators and young minds. And it's just, I think my favorite thing about hearing about this history is that it's a reminder that, man, we've just been down in the dumps before. We've been down in the dumps and down in the dumps. Like, Detroit is...
The biggest boom and bust economy in America.
Yeah, it's like that whole
When
everybody...
we boom, nobody booms bigger. When we bust,
But we bust
oh,
hard.
do we boast.
So we got to figure out how to stop that cycle.
Well, on the other hand, unfortunately, for whatever reason, we've gotten away from teaching Detroit history to our kids.
We've gotten away from teaching history, period. It's
I,
very
I see
upsetting.
I see this in the kids that come to our museum for tours. They have no idea what the history of Detroit is and what accomplishments we made. How Ford and George Washington Carver pioneered plastics and automobiles together, and how the cosmetic industry and how other things that were minority businesses got going here, and were just big booming businesses. Of course, Motown, which
Yep.
conquered the music industry.
Yep.
All of those businesses were great enterprises that started right here in Detroit. And we really don't teach kids what their history is so they know what they can do. And the reality is that if you study Detroit's history and you get to know this up and down curve that we're in, you can make money in Detroit in the boom and the bust cycle.
You absolutely can.
Either way,
But you have to trust.
you have to trust, and you have to work.
And you have to put, there's got to be some faith.
There's got to be some faith, but there also has to be a lot of sweat equity.
A lot.
Businesses don't grow by fun.
It's not an easy town.
They
It's
take
not.
they take risks, they adventure, they win, they lose, they come back. The average small business in America goes bust 2.8 times before they're successful.
Really?
That's the average small business in America.
That's an incredible statistic. Is that like a U.S.
Now,
Labor Bureau?
yeah,
That's an incredible
well, it's
statistic.
Small Business Administration.
That's fantastic.
I used to do a lot of work with the Small Business Administration and small businesses in Detroit. And that was... Now, in order to counter that, our Wayne State University, one of the great urban colleges in America, created its small business incubator system, where you're in a lab and you figure out a product. We take you over to the incubator, we make you a business, we find you financing, and the college uses its consulting apparatuses to help you, because the idea is we want 90% of the business to succeed in their first enterprise rather than to fail. And 90% of small businesses across the country fail in their first enterprise. 90% of the 90 businesses that fail because they don't have a good business plan.
Well, because you can be good at what you do. Like, I mean, like I'm good at real estate. I understand real estate. I know how to transact real estate. But when it comes to bookkeeping and it comes to all that other stuff, I have to, I mean, I don't outsource it per se, but I have to have help. I have to pay someone to help me.
You got to have help.
Because if I don't,
So Henry Ford in his first business, the Detroit Automobile Company, had that same problem. He knew machines, he knew machining, he knew automobiles. He didn't have a clue about business. He was busting his first year. But he came back, and he came back the third time. And the third time he got it figured out, and he was successful. And that's true of most of the small businesses in America.
yeah.
Now, small businesses in America create somewhere between 40 and 60% of all the employment in America. So small businesses become a big deal.
We only have a few minutes.
Okay?
And I could listen all day, and I'd love to have you back because I would love to hear the last half of the 20th century. I mean, we kind of got we don't even have enough time today to cover everything.
It's a
But
big town with a long history.
it's a long history, and you haven't even touched on Prohibition or the Purple Gang or any of that, right? Yeah, I mean,
we haven't touched on that.
yeah, you know, and the waves of immigration, you know, it's Greek town, Pole town, and I know sometimes people often in this day and age say that it's I don't mean it in a pejorative sense. It was Greek town because that's where the Greeks moved, and it was Pole town because that's where the Poles moved, and it was Mexican town because
It
that
was Cork Town because that's where the Irish moved.
yeah, from County Cork. So
And you have to remember that Detroit was a blank slate. We were creating these little subdivisions in town to accommodate the latest immigrant group.
yeah.
And they wanted to be with their own kind because of the language, because
Language,
of the
kids,
churches, because of all the relationships that they had. So they congregated in their own little communities across the city as they went.
So let me ask you this. If you were, I got a call from somebody in Brooklyn that I knew, acquaintance, friend of a friend, who said, listen, I'm working for Google now and I can work from anywhere. And my wife and I, they have a 6-month-old, and we're living in a 500 square foot place in Brooklyn, and we're paying $4,000 a month, and we have no backyard and no front yard and no parking spot. And as great as New York is, I'm hearing all this fun stuff about Detroit and the restaurants and all this stuff that's going on. I might be putting you on the spot. I don't know if what is your favorite neighborhood? If you were 30 years old, moving to Detroit right now, with your wife or your partner and your kid, or even just if you were 30 moving to Detroit right now, I know where I would want to live. Where would you want to live?
My first stop would be to the future city on Grand Boulevard. And I would want to go look at all the city maps and look at all the new development that's planned for Detroit in the future.
I will have to source this and let you guys know where you can look this up.
Future City, it's an open office. Come on in and
Future City.
see what's going on. It's right on Grand Boulevard, next to the Cadillac place where the Michigan State offices are. The old
okay.
the old GM headquarters. It's
Okay.
just to their west side. Now I'd want to go there and I'd want to look, and then I would want to find that crack right between the major developments, where there's some great old housing, but it's not in the city master plan for redevelopment. And I would take one of those houses that needs a lot of work, and I would go in there and paint it and clean it and fix it up and restore it, put a nice new kitchen, a nice new bathroom in it. And I did that when I went to Boston Edison. I bought a house for $27,000.
Well, you could still buy a house in Detroit, a
In-
brick house for $27,000.
2000. Now this was a 3,200 square foot house with a beautiful oak floors and
Oh, I know. I
African
show 'em all the time.
African walnut woodwork, and it was a gorgeous home.
Plaster, wet plaster,
Wet
cove
plaster.
ceilings, crown molding, 3 fireplaces,
You-
beautiful masonry.
You got the idea. Now I bought that house for $27,000. I sold it for a significant profit.
I'm sure.
I bought another house on Longfellow, and I restored that one, and I sold that one, which I bought for $28,000. I sold it for $246,000. Today, those houses are now in the $1 million range.
Oh, absolutely. They're
If I had not
approaching
sold
7
this,
figures.
if I had not sold at the beginning of the recession in 2008, when I saw that coming, it would be even better today.
Well, now is the time to start getting property in Highland Park, right? Highland Park is one of the little
it's
cracks.
a time. Highland Park is one of those wonderful neighborhoods.
And I keep banging that drum. We only have a couple minutes, but
But it is. Highland Park has some gorgeous housing. It was housing for the executives of the Ford Motor Company and other major companies.
where all the rich people lived. Yeah.
The main Dodge Main factory, all of their executives lived around Highland Park. The houses are beautiful. The neighborhoods are fine. You come and get a house, you fix it up, you make the block club work, and there's buku profit to be made.
Yeah, new fire station, new police, new infrastructure. The visual arts scene over on Midland. There's a fantastic 333 Midland over there. There's a lot of artists moving here because they have tons and tons of space to work, studio space. And you can weld and you can cut and you can drill and you can do all these crazy things and work outside, things you can't do in other cities when you're creating visual
Since
art.
Detroit's Society of Arts and Crafts back
Yeah.
in the 20s, Detroit has been a town that welcomed artists and
Yep.
encouraged artists, and we have some of the most beautiful art in the world all over Detroit and all over Highland Park.
Yeah.
And we need to do more, and there will be more.
I'm very encouraged. I'm very encouraged. I think Highland Park and Milwaukee Junction are 2 places to really watch. This city welcomes everyone. It's not necessarily easy. You got to get here and you got to figure it out. A lot of people are intimidated because we don't have mass transit, and I can help you. I can guide you. I understand mass transit. I understand the mentality. I've lived in places